Welcome to the 2019 Mary Alice Davis Lecture. I'm so happy that you all could be here. It's a great mix of students in the community, of friends and family, and I think that's just the best combination you can ever have. So tonight we have Ayesha Rascoe, who is the White House correspondent for NPR. But before we get started, I want to point out a couple of special guests. Alicia Helton. Her father is a longtime director of the School of Journalism and later the first dean of communication here, long before it was Moody. So why don't you raise your hand so. And sitting next to her is Dr. Richard Cole. He's the Dean Emeritus of the College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina, which is a big rival. It's a great school. I gotta say, it's a fabulous school, so thank you for joining us. He was managing editor of the Daily Texan. I don't want to guess. Tell us the year, come on. 63, 64? That was a pretty pivotal time. Oh my goodness. Wow. And what's your name? Oh my gosh, we've got some legends here, and this is fun, and I'm really enjoying this, and this is a time to connect. They actually visited the Daily Texan, so we keep these connections, and that's what we want you students to do in about 40 years. Come on back. The Daily Texan will still be in the basement somewhere. Before we get started, Ken Herman, who is a columnist at the Austin American-Statesman, is going to remind all of us, for those of us who don't know her, and for those of us who this is new, why we remember the fabulous Mary Alice Davis. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Nice to see the students here, including I see we have some non-traditional older students down front here. Nice of you to be here. I was privileged to be a friend and colleague of Mary Alice. And frankly, hard to believe she's been gone so long. But she was, the great thing about Mary Alice as a person was her default mode was a smile. And unless and until you proved worthy of something else, you got the smile. But she was not afraid when you proved unworthy of the smile to not give you the smile. And also what I liked about her the best is she laughed at bad jokes. And who doesn't like someone who laughs at bad jokes? Mary Alice grew up on a farm near Waco. And her and some friends in high school had a group they called themselves the Grade 8. There's nothing wrong with giving yourself a bombastic title early in life as long as you can live up to it later. It's nice that two of the members, I'm told, are here today, Linda Schaefer and Judy Rouse. Are you here? Still great. Look at that. Fabulous. Great. It is nice, and it's they stayed connected, even though Mary Alice, I guess, moved away for her last year of high school to the Richardson in the Dallas area. It's nice when friends stay connected. Mary Alice was part of what I view as something of a greatest generation for women. And some of you younger women here, the duty falls on you to continue. It's hard to believe, even though the struggle still goes on, there was a time when women were not always welcome in the news business. And Mary Alice was one of those who helped break it. Jim tells a story about how when Mary Alice first went to work at the Corpus Christi Caller, they had never had a woman on the night copy desk because they were afraid it would be unsafe for her to leave the building after work. Mary Alice, and this was the way she operated, proved them wrong and began a career that really did become legendary. She was an opinion writer at the American Statesman, overlapping my years there. And what she proved was anyone can have an opinion, but the first thing you need to have is the facts. And if you don't have the facts, your opinion, it's just that. An informed opinion is something you can defend is more important. And she learned the things she knew, especially about state government. She worked a long time for the House Study Group, became the House Research Organization, which is a body in the legislature that does all the deep research and really writes the legislation that gets produced on the floor. And she was important doing that. She spent the years doing that and then worked as the Statesman as an opinion writer. And it was important to all of us to have people like Mary Alice around. The greatest story I love about Mary Alice, it tells you everything. She and some of her friends often played Trivial Pursuit, which I guess is still a thing maybe. And they were playing one night, and the question was, What sense do you lose when struck by lightning? The official and correct answer was a sense of hearing. The better answer, offered by Mary Alice, when you get struck by lightning, you lose your sense of humor. And it was the way she looked at the world, and it was important. And again, especially to the young women here, I hope you appreciate what people like Mary Alice and so many others, some of the audience here today, did for bringing those important voices into the newsroom. I've never understood discrimination against gender, race, or ethnicity. As someone, a plain old white male, come on in and help. You know, I'm all for help, and it was so stupid to discount and disqualify talent and intelligence. I don't know what we're thinking, and in too many ways now still are thinking. I look forward to hearing Ayesha's remarks as someone who also spent a few years at the White House. I'm sure it's a little different now. When I was there, I think it was President Coolidge or one of those. I don't even remember. He didn't talk much. He was kind of silent. What's going on? I don't know how many of you noticed, but I'm starting to think the current president is a little different. Anybody else? Anybody else? I pick up on this. I have ESPN, so I pick up on this stuff. Again, thanks for being here, and I look forward to the program. Thank you.
We're already having fun. So the first Mary Alice Davis lecture was in 2005. Now it's 2019. And I am so proud and just honored to introduce you to Ayesha Davis for the 2019 Mary Alice Davis Distinguished Lecture. So to let you know a little bit about the format, she'll talk for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a conversation, and then you'll have an opportunity for the last 15 minutes or so to ask questions. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. I am so honored to be here at the University of Texas at Austin, and so honored to be speaking as a part of the Mary Alice Davis Distinguished Lecture, to be delivering that lecture. I haven't been to Austin that much, but I am happy to be here. This is my second time coming to visit, and I think it seems like a beautiful city, so I'm glad to be here. I really am glad to be here because I try to never pass up an opportunity to talk to students in particular and to the general public about the work of being a journalist and why I feel like it's very important what journalists do. I know that later we're going to get into why I became a journalist, and we're going to get into kind of what brought me to this place at this point. But the reason why I really love to talk to students is because I feel like it wasn't that long ago when I was in these seats. At this point, I'm not gonna say how old I am. It has been a little while, but I still feel like it was just yesterday when I was a college student. And actually, like, my best friend from college is in the audience, Keisha Robinson Musanda, and she could tell you stories of how, not all the stories, not all the stories, but she could tell you some stories about how I was just terrified. I was petrified that I would not make it as a journalist. I questioned whether I had it, whether I was cut out to do it, whether I had anything to say that was worthwhile, and whether anyone would want to hear it. So I always, whenever I'm given the opportunity, I want to encourage young people who are interested in journalism, especially those who feel like this is their passion, feel like there's nothing else that they want to do. This is what drives them. I always want to say to them, you can do it. Keep going. I can't say that everything will be easy or everything will just work out. This is an industry that is going through many changes, and there are challenges, serious challenges, to the way that we present the news, to the way that we are able to report the news from all sorts of sectors, from whether it's financially or, government trying to crack down. All of these issues are very real, and also people just not wanting to hear the truth. But what I can say is that this industry at this moment in time needs as many voices as possible. It needs to hear from diverse perspectives, and it needs to hear from you. You have something to add, and you have something that the world needs to hear. And so I want to say, press on, keep going, keep up the good work, because this is important work that journalists do, and it's important work that we are trying to do for the public. And so that's all that I have to say. I want to keep it short because I think it's better as a conversation, and I want to get to your questions. But essentially, that's what I want to say.
Jim Davis, who Mary Alice's husband and daughter Rachel, established this lectureship in her name, and it's to bring wonderful people like Ayesha. It was Jim and Jan, Jim's wife, who suggested Ayesha, and then I can already say this has been a great 15-30 minutes. So, and now Delia Jones is going to have that conversation with Ayesha. Delia is a longtime journalist here in the state, and she's actually teaching a cool course for us right now called Audio Place and
Sound in Place.
Sound in Place. So
How to enhance the essence of your story with the sounds around you.
I need to take that class.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank y'all so much for being here. So from my understanding, this conversation is going to go on for about 30 minutes, and then around 6:15-ish is when we're going to actually start taking questions from the audience. And I guess I kind of want to start this conversation by kind of talking about the presence of you and what that means to someone like me who works in NPR. For a long time, I was the only Black reporter for the state for NPR, and we just hired another Black reporter on as well. But I just wanted to let you know, as a girl who comes from the rural South, who's always been kind of, the elephant in the room, I guess, when it comes to diversity, that hearing your voice on the air was, and I'm about to get emotional, was one of the most impactful moments I've probably had with my time at NPR.
Wow.
To not only hear your amazing reporting, but to also hear myself affirmed through your voice, right? Meant that I could actually do what you can do, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
And that's truly coming from a really, good place. And we can actually talk about this later.
No, but thank you. No, it's a lot.
My first question is, what made you get into journalism in the first place?
Well, thank you so much for that, and thank you for and I'll just say about my voice and everything, and we may get into it more later. But when I got onto radio, I was just talking as myself. I really didn't think that I was doing anything that was out of the ordinary. But I think that what people have responded to is hearing a voice that is very familiar to them, but hasn't always been familiar in public media or even on TV, or that you just don't hear a lot. And I am grateful to be able to be in a position where no one has told me to change my voice at NPR. Nobody that works at NPR has said, oh, you need to do this or that. They've been really supportive, and I think that it's important for people to be able to hear a voice that sounds like theirs, speaking with authority, and that you don't have to sound a certain way to be intelligent. You don't have to sound a certain way to be professional. You can be professional and sound the way people talk. But the way that I got into journalism is I was in middle school, and I took an aptitude test, and it said that I would be good at journalism. And I was like, oh, that sounds good. I may be the only person that, was really helped by an aptitude test. but I was like, okay, this sounds like, I think that will work for me because I loved reading, I loved writing, I loved history. That was my favorite subject. And so this was going to be a way that I could write history today, the first draft of history. I was really into hip hop magazines, Vibe, XXL, The Source back in the day. So ask me any Jay-Z trivia, I know it. I was really into it. And I really love newspapers. So because we had a subscription to our local newspaper, but my mom basically used it for coupons. Which is very important. but I would actually read it. She didn't actually read it. I would actually read the newspaper. And so I was just like, this seems like a cool thing to do. And so I was, on my local newspaper, had a teen section. I wrote for that. I was on the high school newspaper.
What were some of your subjects for your section?
So for the teen section, I remember very distinctly. So one of the favorite ones that I did was this thing about a barrel racer, which you may know about around here. She was a barrel racer, and so I got to ride a horse for that story. She was a teenager, and she had won competition. So I went to her house, and she let me ride her horse with her. I wasn't and that was my first time on a horse. So I did that, and I did a story about the people, the athletic. Trainer, they were high schoolers, but they would help when people got injured.
Oh yeah, the trainers.
When they got injured in high school sports. So those were some of the. And I also did a story. This was kind of sad. Well, it wasn't. It was about kids with cancer, teenagers with cancer. So I did a lot of just.
You got started pretty early then.
Yeah, I got started. Yeah, and so it was, but I really enjoyed it, and part of it was being able to meet all these people who I would have never met otherwise. And then being able to have these cool experiences like riding a horse, which I hadn't done before.
Yeah, and then that kind of leads me into my next question. Then how did you learn to kind of cultivate those talents so early, right? Was this with your family? Was it actually reading those articles that you used to read?
I think a lot of it was reading the articles. And I will say that I was always kind of more of I would say I was pretty shy growing up. And I don't think that people would have looked at me and thought, oh yeah, she's gonna be a hard-charging reporter, that one. But, my family knows, and people that know me well know, I'm quiet, but don't push me. And so I think that part of it was developing my confidence, and part of it was just by forcing myself to do it. So I wasn't necessarily someone who would always just go up to people. But if I had a story, I was just I'm going to get the story. So even if I'm scared to death, and I don't want to go up to these people I don't know, I'm going to go up to them and do it because I got to get the story. It was just kind of I was forced to, right? And so if the option is don't get the story or go talk to these people, I was just I'm going to go talk to these people. And I'm going to go, march up to that door. I'm going to go knock, and, I'm going to do it. And so even though, and a lot of times I will surprise myself because I didn't think I would do that. But in the moment, it's just if I have to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do what I have to do.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you began your White House coverage for NPR kind of at the end of the Obama administration.
Yeah, I was actually with Reuters,
okay.
And then I was with Reuters, so I covered the last year of the Trump administration for Reuters, and then I came to NPR last year, so I've been about a year and a half is covering the Trump administration.
Yeah, so first of all, how has it been doing that coverage during that transition, but then also during this very historical moment?
It's been, covering the Trump administration has obviously been, it has been a big shift. It's been a big shift for journalism. It's been a time of a lot of change. And and President Trump will say, he is not like other presidents. I think they're very open and upfront about that. and that I think he at one time said he was postmodern presidential or something. But he is, he acknowledges that. And so covering this administration has been, I think it's been an adjustment. And I think because at times you've had to deal with an administration that doesn't follow maybe the traditional norms. And then you've also had to deal with an administration that doesn't necessarily speak with one voice. And so that is often one of the biggest challenges, is that in the past, whatever administration it was, Republican, Democrat, whoever, they would have a message they would want to deliver, and they would deliver it. Now you could ask one person at the White House this, they may give you one answer, and then the president may tweet something completely different the next hour. And it's happened, and it happens. And so who's telling the truth? Or not even who's telling the truth, but like, so what is actually happening? Yeah. Like, it's not even a question of like truth telling at times. At times, it's a question of, so what direction are you taking?
And so, I mean, do you find yourself having to work with other reporters more often instead of this kind of being a competition on who's going to get the scoop, who's going to get the story? Is it more so of a team effort now?
Well, I think what it is, I think that the press corps has always been pretty collegial, even though it's pretty competitive. But I think what it is at times just being frank and upfront about what we don't know. And sometimes decisions just haven't been made. And sometimes the White House staff is being honest, and when they say, we don't know what is happening, we don't know what the decision will be, and there could be a decision, and that decision could change. And so I think it's about being upfront about what we know and what we don't know, and then it's also about being upfront where we're told things and there's no evidence to support that, or we're told things and actually that's not true, and we know that's not true. And so just being very upfront about that, and I would hope that this wouldn't just be a Trump administration thing. I think it's good for reporters to question people in power and to question what they're saying and not to just accept it at face value. That's not what we're supposed to do as journalists for any politician, person of power, CEO, executive. We're always supposed to be questioning. Yeah,
and so how do you then know who to trust? I think that's a big question.
I think at times you have to go by, look, if this person has said things and they don't always add up, you have to question it. You have to say, okay, where is your evidence? Go back to, what is the evidence of this? And that's what I always go back to. If they are saying, a lot of times, and this will happen a lot, especially now, some news will come out, some story will come out, and you'll have a politician say, that's just totally not true. My question always with that is, okay, tell me how it's not true. What part of it's not true? This is a very big story. There are lots of points in it. There are lots of facts in it. What facts are you disputing? You can't just do a blanket denial. If it's not true, were you there that day? Did you say that? Did you say this part of it? Which part of it are you denying? You can't just let people just say, oh, that's not true. Well, what part of it isn't true? Mm-hmm. Every part of it's not true. You weren't there. You didn't, So I think that's part of it's like trying things to see, are they true? Try, if you ever been to church and they say try him and know he's true. Sometimes you gotta try things, or you have to just question things to know, are they actually true?
And speaking of questioning, I think that some of my favorite moments of watching you, especially on CNN, is when you're going back and forth, right, with White House officials, trying to clarify. And I think of one recent one, the back and forth you had with Mick Mulvaney.
Yeah.
What are you? So first of all, I just want to say that I'm always on the other side of the TV, like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's journalism right there. But what are you thinking in those moments, right?
So, and I'll be upfront because I just want to be very clear. Just like I said before, that I don't think people would have looked at me as a hard-charging journalist. I don't think I would have necessarily looked at myself like that. I surprised myself when I looked back at that Mulvaney clip. I was surprised. And when I put the finger up, I was surprised at myself. I said, who is that? But I will say, so what I will say for people who may look at that and go, I don't know if I could do that. I didn't know that I could do that. I think that part of it is just practice, right? Like part of it is, I had been, I covered the Obama administration where they had daily briefings. And so even though people didn't pay attention to those briefings as much, they happened, and I would be in there and I would be asking questions. So I've had time, and obviously I've been a reporter for, over a decade. So I've had time to ask questions. I've spent a lot of time asking questions and doing it. And so I think that helps to build your confidence, right? It's just getting out there, doing it. It's not always gonna work. There were times when I would ask questions and I'd be like, I should have followed up. And I didn't follow, I kind of let them cut me off. I shouldn't have done that. Like, there are times when that happens and you just gotta get back out there and you have to try it again. And so I think some of it just comes from doing it often, committing acts of journalism. And then also, and some of it just comes from also just knowing the subject very well, because one thing is you cannot, especially when people they have a story and they're very confident in what they're saying. Like oftentimes when people get up there, they're ready. They have what they're going to say, and they're very confident in it. And so you have to know the story, right? Like you have to know the subject in depth to be able to question when they try to say something. So you can say, no, that's not actually, or no. So you can do the follow-up. Because if I have to ask about a subject that I don't really know that well, and you give me an answer, I might just go, okay, because I don't know to question what you said. I don't know what you said is actually not true, or that you're, gliding over this one part. So part of it is just knowing the subject really well, being very well prepared. And then you can ask those questions and do those follow-ups. But yes, I would say practice and preparation.
Yeah, and I'm curious, and not to paint every Black household as a monolith, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, in a lot of ways, as Black women, we're told not to question things, right? Yeah. And so for you, how did you get over that barrier? How did it get to a point to where you were actually comfortable enough to actually push back and not really care about how people kind of perceived you in the room? Because as we know, you're one of a few Black journalists, right? And a few Black women who are actually in the room at the time.
So I think it comes, like I said, with time, because I do have a nature where it's like, I think that sometimes, especially as women, we're taught to be nice and taught, don't be mean, don't be too aggressive, don't, just be nice, and we're not necessarily rewarded for being what is perceived as aggressive. But when you're reporting and you're doing this job, you have to at times be annoying, you have to be aggressive, you have to ask people a lot of questions that they don't want to hear, and you have to do it over and over again. And then you also have to kind of come to a point where you're like, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm not trying to get into a fight with you. I don't ever view it as a fight. Like, I never view it as like, we're fighting. And I'm not trying to get you to say anything. I'm not trying to get a moment, even though I know people will say, oh, you're trying to get a moment. I'm not trying to get a moment. Can't speak for anybody else. I'm not trying to get a moment, but I'm just trying to make sure we're very clear on what you're saying, and I just want to get an actual answer to what I'm asking. That's all I want. I'm not telling you what you need to say. And so I think when you can just feel comfortable in like, I'm just asking you, this is what you said. What did you mean by that? Like, can you just clarify? I think when you feel confident in that, then you can do it. But it's always nerve-wracking. Mm-hmm. And to be totally transparent, I get very nervous, like when I'm asking questions before I go live on the radio. When I've asked questions to the president, my heart is beating. Thank God you can't hear it through the microphone, because my heart is beating in my ears, and I'm like, but I go through. So it's nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking.
Yeah. And, what has been kind of the most awe-inspiring, or I guess kind of memorable moments kind of during this whole process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some of the most memorable, like the moments that I will remember, like I went to Hanoi in February with President Trump, where they had that failed meeting. But I got to see Kim Jong Un, the head of North Korea, which I don't think a lot of people get to see him. And so it was very cool to see. I mean, not cool. He has gulags. It's like he's not a good guy. But I think it was historic to be able to see him and to see him meet with an American president. And so I was witnessing his history, and they're obviously dealing with nuclear issues. So these are very serious issues. So that was to be there and to be a part of that. I was also at the meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. And so that moment, I definitely will not forget, that press conference where, President Trump was basically defending Putin, questioning American intelligence, whether Russians were actually involved in the 2016 election interference. That was a very charged day. There was a lot of just being in the room for that ahead of time. There was just all of this kind of like intense energy. Security had come in and dragged a guy out who was with the press, but he had a sign. And so somehow they found out he had the sign, and they dragged him out of the press conference before it went down. And we had already been waiting a very long time, and we hadn't actually seen Putin and Trump take questions together. Like, that hadn't happened. This was their first formal press conference, and they got questions like, Putin was asked, "Do you have anything on the president?" And he just he laughed and said, "Oh, you're silly to think that I would have anything on the president." I mean, it was just a moment that I'll always remember.
Yeah. Do you ever, and I ask this because I have a lot of students who come and ask me. They ask, all of this excitement, right? All of these stories that you have to tell. How do you tell yourself that you belong in these spaces and that you deserve to actually be in these spaces telling these stories? How do you overcome imposter syndrome? Because we don't address that in class at all, right? Many of our professors are not that diverse, right? And so as a student of color, I don't have many people I can go to unless I confide into a mentor. So how did you kind of get over that?
So I would say, I think that it helped a lot. I think first of all, what I would say is, if you are in the space, you belong in that space. Like, if you're in the space, if you are in the chair, you belong to be in that chair. Now, sometimes you may not feel, I don't always feel that way. But sometimes you gotta fake it till you make it. Yeah. And so sometimes you gotta say, I am in this chair, and then you gotta look around and you gotta say, these people are cool, they cool, but I really don't think they're that, they're no better than me, right? Like, they're here just like I am.
I imagine you blasting Beyonce.
Right, there's a lot of Beyonce in this. If you need to play some Beyonce to get yourself together, do that as well. Whatever you need to do. I do blast a lot to,
Favorite song? Favorite Beyonce song?
Well, I have a lot of favorites, but if you're talking about I'm blasting, it's it's the don't hate yourself.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not safe for work.
Yeah,
but
gotcha.
It's all a lemonade. But if you know who I am. So let's leave it there. But a lot of favorites. But you gotta just tell. Sometimes you're not gonna feel like there are plenty of days when I'm like, what in the world am I doing? How did I end up here? And what I try to do is I try to say, okay, what can I do to, like, if there's something where I feel lacking, I try to be concrete and say, okay, is there something that I can work on? If I feel like I need more sources, okay, let me try to start calling so many people each day and just try and maybe I can try this person. Like, try to come up with concrete steps that you can do if it's based in something that you can actually work on. If it's just feeling like I'm in a space and there's nobody that looks like me, there's nobody that sounds like me, sometimes it's just saying, I belong here. I have every right to be here, just like everyone else. Like, everyone, it's not that everyone else is so smart and intelligent. They're here just like you. And they're trying to get the story just like you are. And you deserve to be here. And sometimes you have to tell yourself that. I'm in this seat because this is the seat where I'm supposed to be. And don't allow anyone to take that away from you, because that's just not true. And so sometimes you have to talk to yourself, sometimes you have to encourage yourself, sometimes you have to pick yourself up, sometimes you have to, cry to yourself and then get back out there. Because I've had many moments where it was rough. I've had many moments where I was told, oh, I think you're too quiet, I don't think you're really cut out to do this. But there was just something inside of me where I felt like, I can do this. Like, I can do it. Like, give me the mic, I can do it. And you just have to have that to just keep going, even though it's hard. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I tell my students a lot of the time too, I'm like, they're gonna say something anyway,
yeah.
So you may as well.
You may as well just do what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And who's gonna stop you?
Yeah.
No one's gonna show up and say, oh, you actually don't belong here. And then you can say, well, look at that person over there, because I know they don't belong here. And then just keep on like, nobody's gonna show up. Like, you know how many people are walking around doing jobs they're not qualified to do? Just keep going. So just keep going.
Well, so we all know that journalism can be a little debilitating, right?
Yeah.
Constant news cycle. What do you do in your free time to kind of do self-care?
That is, people ask that all the time. I think it's a good question. I really think maybe they should give me some good answers, because I have a hard time with it. I'm always honest, I have a hard time with the self-care because it's very busy. It's very hard to turn off because the news is breaking all the time, and I'm often always have like Twitter on, and I'm always checking Twitter, and so it's hard. If I'm on vacation, I do try to turn off the alerts. I do try to not look at it. I do not always succeed, but when I'm on vacation, I really try. I have young children, and so they have demands. So when I come home, they pretty much make me not be focused on work because they want juice and they want crackers and Cheez-Its and this and that, and they want what they want when they want it. They're very demanding. And they don't care about.
Where they got it from?
I don't know. Not from me. And they want what they want, and so usually just taking care of my kids, that's not really self-care because it's caring for them, but it's my other work that I do, my other very important work. And sometimes you have to just take, solace in that. Like my middle child, she finally started getting potty trained, and I was like, if I do nothing else in this world, I've potty trained 2 human beings. I still got a third one to work on, but 2 humans.
That's what the 2 oldest are for.
Yeah, the 2 humans, they are potty trained, and I help do that. And so I think that might be the biggest thing if I don't do anything else. So you gotta take the little victories, yeah. Mm-hmm. But I like music, a lot of Beyonce, a lot of old school R&B. I used to watch a lot of reality TV. Now I'm so busy, I can't even watch my reality TV.
What's your favorite show?
I used to do Love and Hip Hop. Yeah, it was really, it was Ratchet TV. Yes. It was Ratchet. Good. And then I would watch.
Nothing more healthy.
Yes, I would, the Real Housewives, all of that. Married to Medicine, all of that. But I really don't, I'm behind on all my shows. Yeah. But I just try to do that, and anything that's just fun to watch or just not politically related. Yeah. That's what I do.
All right. And we have about 4 minutes, so I think I can squeeze in maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Sure. one good question. Does your family actually know what you do?
My
and I ask this question because my mom, she knows I'm on the air, but she thinks I DJ.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So she's like DJ Heavy D in the mix. I'm like, Mom, that's not what you do.
Because you on the radio. Because you on the
I'm like,
radio.
it doesn't work like that, man. It doesn't work like that.
I don't think they really knew what I did when I was an energy reporter. So when I would say, I'm a reporter, and then I would go, I cover energy, they would go, okay. Okay. But when I say I cover the White House, they know it. And then because I do TV, then they know that. Yeah. They're very like, you're on TV, okay? So that like really, connects to them. And my uncle listens to a lot of NPR, so he knows. My son will see me on TV, and I've been laughing with my friend about this, but my son said, I said, do you know what I do for a living? He said, oh, I know. He was like, you talk, and then someone else talks, and then you talk again. And so I'm like, that is what I do, essentially. When you break it down like that.
I mean, it's simple. It's simple math, Mom, honestly.
Yeah. So they kind of know now, especially with the White House stuff. They pay more attention to it. Yeah.
Well, one of my last questions before we kind of wrap this up for questions, if you had a series or a tidbit of advice for journalism students right now, getting prepared to actually enter the world of journalism in this world, I guess.
Yeah.
What advice would that be?
So I always say this, and that's to take advantage of every opportunity that you get, even if it doesn't look like it will turn into a job, or even if it's not guaranteed to turn into anything else, because you just never know what could lead to something. I took a business reporting class at Howard that was taught by a Reuters, someone who worked at Reuters. It was like a partnership. And there wasn't anything that was supposed to come from that class other than me learning about business journalism. But because the teacher saw my work, and he worked at Reuters, he said, you should get an internship. I'm gonna recommend you. And so otherwise, I don't think I would have ever gotten an internship at Reuters. I'd only had like one internship before, and it wasn't for a big paper, and I don't think they would have had any real interest in me otherwise. But because of that experience, I was able to get hired at Reuters and as an intern, and then the rest was history. I ended up staying at Reuters for like a decade. And so I would say, anytime you have an opportunity to speak to a professional, to speak to someone who's in a space doing what you want to do, even if it doesn't lead to anything, just always try to talk to them, always try to put your best foot forward, whatever it is, even if it seems like a really small thing and you're not really doing anything, that seems really monumental. Always just kind of give your best, put your best foot forward. And then I would say, just as a reporter, to be a great reporter or just to do the job, just make sure that you're just focused on the facts. Like, it's not necessarily gonna be glamorous. Like, this sounds like, even with me, like a lot of what I'm doing as a White House reporter, sitting in vans all day, right? Like, it's not always glamorous, it's not always fun, it's not always the most high profile thing, but if you put in the work and just focus on the facts and focus on reporting the truth, I think it can be worthwhile. Yeah.
All right, Ayesha Rascoe. All right, so now we're gonna open the floor up to questions for about 15 minutes. We do ask that you kind of, be considerate of the length of questions and kind of limit the amount of comments that you do say so that everybody gets a chance to kind of speak. And I think that you can line up at these two mics right here in the aisle. So I'll give folks a few seconds to hop up and do what they want to do.
I'm not going to ask you a question, but. Guys, don't be shy. It's all right. No points off. But I do want to say, if a journalism student would like to cover this for the website, because I'm not sure if this was assigned, I can get you a byline and maybe a small stipend. So
I don't know if I see any of my students in here. Hello? Come on now.
And I know you can find me on the website. So if you're interested, let me know.
Hey. So can you talk a little bit about your transition from the other reporting you did to White House reporting and how you got that job and what kinds of things that, set you up to do that?
Yeah, so I covered energy policy for many years at Reuters. And so being that I was based in DC and that I was covering policy, even though energy doesn't sound very political, it is when it comes to policy. And so I was covering, the Hill, I was covering federal agencies, I was covering things that happen at the White House or White House decisions. So I had a lot of experience with that. Even though it didn't necessarily, it wasn't like I was on the Hill or covering campaigns. And so eventually I ended up covering energy and legal issues, but at the same time I was helping out, filling in on the White House beat when they needed someone, they were short-staffed. And from that, an opening became available and I applied for that and I got it. I think that it helped, like I said, just being, because covering energy, you have to get really in depth in very kind of arcane topics. And so I feel like it gave me a foundation of knowing how to dig into things that people may not be super interested in, like renewable fuel standards, liquefied natural gas exports, but like how that happens and the policy of it and all of those things. And so I feel like that's where I got a foundation that helped me. And it helped me learn about the way DC works. Yeah.
We have one approaching?
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
What would you say the hardest story you've ever covered or the hardest day for you in journalism has been so far?
That's a good question. I think it's, I think that, I don't know if I have like a single day that's really been tough. I think there are days when there are a lot of things that are being thrown at us at one time and you don't your head can kind of be spinning around, trying to figure out like what's what. I think some of the hardest stories to write about or to cover can be just, when you're talking to about gun policy and things like that, and you're talking to the parents of people that lost their children in Parkland or at Sandy Hook. Thankfully I wasn't covering the White House when Sandy Hook happened. I was covering it during Parkland. But those are difficult to cover and I'm not even on the front lines of it, but just even from where I sit, it's tough to cover. And the shooting in Charleston, and when I was covering the White House then, when Obama had to go down and he sang Amazing Grace, I believe after that. So I was at the White House that day. I wasn't down there, but just those are tough things. Yeah, those are tough things to cover. Yes.
There was a talk today in the School of Engineering by a fellow named Alex Epstein, who makes his living as a climate change denier. If you were interviewing him, what would be the first question you would ask?
Oh, that. And see, that's an example of where I would want to study up a lot. I covered climate for many years, but I would want to refresh myself and to be able to know specifically what he's arguing. But the first question I would ask him is just to be clear. So when he says he doesn't believe in climate change, does he believe? Because sometimes that can mean different things. Does it mean that you believe that the climate is changing, but it's not as bad as they say it's going to be? So there are those. Do you believe that it's changing, but it's not? Or do you believe that the climate is always changing and humans are not behind it, so we don't need to worry about it? It's just going to happen. It just is what it is. And then I would have to start following up with, and what are you basing that on? Why do you believe that humans are not causing this when all of these other scientists say this? What makes your science, your research, what are they getting wrong that you have gotten right, but these thousands of other scientists have gotten wrong? And so that's what I would ask. I mean, but that's a legitimate question. So, yes, thank you.
Well, I go back pretty far, and I found a picture the other day that was taken at the state capitol. I was a bureau chief for a newspaper company, and the lieutenant governor wanted all the bureau chiefs to come and have a picture taken with him. And I found that picture the other day. We moved, and I found it. They were all male, every single one of them. And I just, today I look at that and realize how restricted things were back then. And of course, the employers will all say, "Oh, she'll get pregnant." You obviously you have balanced a family and a profession.
Yeah.
Would you give some advice to somebody who would have to do that?
Yeah. I mean, so my advice to someone who's has a family and who is working in a job like this is you need support. You can't do it by yourself. My husband is a great support to me. I couldn't do it without him. He's with them right now. Hopefully they're laying down, getting ready for bed. But you have to have support. My mom lived with us for a long time, and she was a big help. And so you have to have support to do it. No one can do it alone. But it certainly doesn't have to keep you from doing your job. Men have had children for eons, and yet they've worked, and somehow it has worked out. But I know what you're saying. It is different when it is different for moms at times because society can have different expectations on a mother. But I would say you can work very hard, and then you can also show your children that you're working very hard and you're working for them and you're working so that they can have better lives. And you can also value your time with them and make time with them and make that a priority as well. So it's possible. I don't want to say you can do it all. You can't do it all. You do have to manage your time, but you can certainly have a family and do what you have to do. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
It's not the friendliest time for journalists.
Yeah.
And I know we've seen White House reporters have been frequently targeted by different attacks on social media, sometimes in person. And so I'm wondering, has that changed how you approach your work? And yeah, if you could just speak a little bit more about that.
I don't think it's changed necessarily how I've approached my work, but it definitely, I'm cognizant of it, whenever I'm out and traveling and covering rallies and things like that, that you could be a target, that people could be, trying to yell at or scream at you, or even worse, you have to be, and these are things that people talk about, and that, we have to do training and things like that, to be prepared for hostile environments, and so it's a very serious thing, and there have been attacks on journalists, and there have been threats, and so I think it's something that I have to be thinking about and aware of, because things can get very intense. I haven't, thankfully, so far had real threats against me or anything like that, but a lot of journalists have. And so it's not, we're all humans, and to have to deal with that is a lot, and it can take a toll. And so, I take it very seriously. I take my job very seriously, but it's not easy to have to kind of carry that weight.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And we have about 5 more minutes, so I'd say about, I guess, the last 3,
Okay.
if that's okay?
Thanks. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
How did you transition from print media to the radio and being comfortable with hearing your voice on podcasts and radio and things like that?
Yeah. So I'd say the transition is still happening, right? Because I was a print reporter. I majored in, at the time it was called print. It's now, I guess, digital or whatever. But I majored in just print journalism. And so I never had any never took any classes or anything in broadcast. So it's been a new experience. I never read a script before. I never written a script before. And so a lot of it was just learning about how to read a script without sounding like you're reading. So that's taken vocal training and some vocal lessons and things like that. And some of it's practice and, you know, trying to listen to radio pieces as much as possible to figure out, like, oh, that's how I can make that sound, and just doing it and trying to figure out, because there is like a rhythm and a music kind of to a piece. And the way that you can kind of make it flow when you're getting to the, getting to the end and everything can flow into each other. It's almost like, I mean, to me, it's like music.
Yeah,
it's art.
Yeah.
It's something that there are times when I feel like, oh, but it was a long time before I got that, where before I was writing the piece, I'm like, oh, and then I could bring this back, and then, okay, and then it all came together, like, and you can, but it's taking practice, and it's something that I still work on every day, and I say the hardest thing is sounding like myself, but also delivering the news. Like, so how do I do that? How do I sound natural? Like, that is like the hardest thing to me, and that's something that you never really think about in print, because especially like at a place like Reuters, like your voice is, they don't really care much about your voice, they care about the Reuters voice, and so you write in the Reuters voice. But then at NPR, it's kind of like discovering your own voice. And so sometimes it's hard to hear yourself back, because it's stressful and you hear every little mistake you made, but I can see growth, and so that feels good.
Last two questions.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, thanks for coming. So this is a little off topic, so I apologize for meandering a bit. I'm a political scientist, and my research looks at how belonging in politics affects participation among underrepresented groups. So I'm really interested in how signals that get sent can impact how underrepresented groups feel that they belong in politics. And so I was really excited to hear your recent Code Switch episode that you did, where you scraped Twitter data following the go back to where you came from comments. And I was curious if you have done much with those data, if you're starting to consider getting your hands more into data, and if you had considered collaborating with social scientists who look at those types of data.
Yeah, I've talked to at least one like social scientist who's like looking at the so I did a story about the way President Trump has tweeted about lawmakers, and I looked at like all of his tweets. I did it all manually because I don't know how to code, so that's not the ideal way to do this. It took me, yes, that's good, that's important. They didn't teach coding back when I was in school, so it took a very long time, and it's not ideal to do it that way. But I went through for every lawmaker, I looked at the way President Trump had tweeted about them, every current lawmaker. And what I found was that he had talked about the squad and Elijah Cummings in particular in a different way than he had talked about other people in the past. And he had talked about them more frequently. Like, it was getting more intense, and the insults were getting more direct compared to what he had done for other lawmakers. And so I would definitely be interested in that. And now I've had people reach out to me and say, oh, we're looking at trends and all this stuff, and we have codes and programs. So I'm definitely interested in doing more of that, because I think that what President Trump says is really important. And so probably if I could get with someone who really knew what they were, knew how to really scrape that data and do that data, I think it could be, I think it's really important work. So I would love to do that. Yeah, and it's something, so if you want to reach out, like, give my card.
Great.
Thank you.
Hello. I guess this is sort of a variation on what the lady a couple back had. I'm a retired newspaper beat reporter, and of course it's generally on some level antagonistic process, but within that, you make not necessarily friends, but acquaintances that are not negative, not antagonistic, and you hope that the job most of the time is not antagonistic.
Yeah.
You're up there where you have a main player that refers to you as the enemy of the people, fake news, some very terrible people. He uses all these ways. And I just wonder about the psychological stress, and I've wondered about this since he started running in 2015, about dealing with him and the people around him when they're giving off such vibes of you're a terrible person to even be doing what you're doing?
No, it is true, and thank you for that question, because I think there is a psychological toll to have to read about, you know, your profession, other fellow reporters being attacked in just deeply personal ways, and being attacked, as you said, as the enemy of the people. I think that there is an impact from that. We're all human beings, and just kind of taking in that negative, taking in those negative words like over and over again, I don't think it can be healthy. I do like what you said, that oftentimes it is antagonistic, but usually, even though it's antagonistic, you know, people would understand we're both doing our job. Like, you're doing your job as the press secretary, it's my job to question you. It's not personal. We're trying to get information. You're trying to get your message out. That has changed in many ways, where it is deeply personal. I will say that oftentimes just dealing, because I do have to deal with the, you know, the staff and the press office and this. So oftentimes when you're dealing with them one-on-one, it's just, you know, it's kind of like a normal interaction. It's not necessarily them yelling at you, and, you know, you can just go up, you're asking them, what about this, what about that, and they're giving you answers, and it's not necessarily so combative as it is when you're, you know, in front of a camera. And there is a difference when the cameras come on, the attitudes get a little bit different. And even with the president, I've been in off the records with him, and he's not combative with the press in these off the records, not in the ones that I've been in with him. He's actually, you know, he's friendly, and, you know, he's, you know, talking to the reporters, even the reporters who he says he doesn't like, that he personally attacks. When he's, you know, with them behind the scenes, he's not attacking them, right? Like, and so, you know, but the fact that he is putting out into the world at these rallies and on Twitter and in all these other places, you know, basically saying these people are horrible, these people are disgusting, these people are the enemy of the people, that has an impact. That's going out into the world, and people are taking that in. And I think it is a dangerous sentiment to be putting out, to paint this group of people or this profession as enemies of the people, because some people will take that and decide, this is what I need to do to my enemy, which is attack them violently. So it's a dangerous thing to do.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you.